My next guest sparked a nationwide debate a decade ago when she made the decision to leave her 9-year-old son in a Manhattan department store with nothing but a map, a subway card, $20 and quarters for a payphone, trusting that he'd find his own way home. After calling her parenting style free range and publishing her story, Lenore Skenazy was hailed as a mom who gave her kid independence and criticized for her decision, even being labeled as America's worst mom. But now Lenore's parenting style is the basis of a new Utah law which allows children to engage in independent activities like walking, running, biking to and from school, traveling to stores and parks, playing outside and staying home unattended. State welfare officers can no longer take children away from their parents if they're caught doing such activities, as long as the children are adequately fed, clothed and cared for. Here now with more, the president of Let's Grow and founder of Free Range Kids, Lenore Skenazy. Lenore, I've been dying to talk to you for so long. I'm so happy that you're here. I absolutely love what you're doing. I'm not going to hide it. This is not a neutral debate.
A fanboy.
Could you just start by just explaining in your words what's the problem that you're trying to solve here? What are you fighting against?
I'm fighting against a culture that thinks children are in constant danger from literally everything they see, eat, read, hear, do, and especially that they're in danger anytime they're unsupervised. Somehow we've come to believe that if a kid is walking down the street or waiting briefly in a car or comes home with a latchkey, they're automatically in danger, whereas if they were with an adult, somehow they're not. And it's actually enslaving both the kids and the moms who have to be with them all the time, and the kids who get zero independence, which I don't think is a great way to raise kids.
So you're describing a sort of a big change in the culture as this has got worse and worse. Have there also been things that the government or law or whatever, like sort of official ways in which this problem has been made worse?
Yes. If the assumption becomes that any time a child isn't with an adult, they're automatically in danger, that means that whoever has allowed the child to be independent, to walk home — I was allowed to walk home at age 5, nobody was arresting my mom — but now if it's considered dangerous, well then of course you go and arrest the mom, because what kind of mother puts her kid in danger? And so people have — I got a call this morning. I got an email from a woman who had let her kid wait in the car for a few minutes while she went into a grocery, and she came out and she was arrested. She was taken to the station house. She was actually handcuffed to the bench. She told me, I have to get to the bottom of this.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, but the point is that the government, when there are authorities who really believe that an unattended child is automatically an endangered child, they are allowed to investigate the parents. They're allowed to arrest the parents. And we've all heard stories of this. There's the famous story in Maryland of the Métis who let their children 10 and 6. 10 years old was the age of my crossing guard, but now 10 and 6 weren't even allowed to walk home from their little local park in Silver Spring. And then there's the case of Deborah Harrell, a working single mom.
Oh, yes.
You remember this story?
Terrible story.
It was a terrible story. So normally her daughter would come with her every day while she worked during the summer. I mean, she worked all the time, but the kid was off during the summer. 9-year-old girl would come and sit at McDonald's while her mom worked the shift, and she would play on her computer. Well, her computer was stolen in a burglary, and so she asked her mom, how about I go to the sprinkler park instead? There's so many kids. There's a lunch program there. It's really fun. It's boiling hot. It's South Carolina. I'm 9. And the mom said, okay, take a phone. If you need me, call. And the girl went there for a couple days in a row. Third day in a row, some lady said, where is your mother, little girl? And she said, my mom's working, that's why I have a phone. And the woman called 911. And not only was Deborah Harrell arrested, not only did she spend the night in jail, her child was taken away from her for 17 days because of endangerment. And frankly, it's not endangerment to say, my kid is old enough to play in the park, I'm going to let her. It's a beautiful summer day. So you can't have the government allowed to arrest good parents making rational, statistically safe decisions.
Absolutely. Right. Well, I've put my cards on the table. Charlie, I think you might just agree with this, but tell us what you think.
I absolutely agree with every bit of it. If I were to list the problems that we have in society today, it's a lack of independence, a lack of responsibility in people, especially, not just children, but when you get to college-age kids. And you don't get there unless you give kids responsibility and independence. And is it a risk? Absolutely. I'd love to bubble wrap my kids and never let them, but that would be you're never going to grow up that way. But one thing beyond just children, I'm amazed at the college level the degree to which you see this infantilization of kids. I read a story a couple weeks ago about the Penn State Outing Club, which has been sponsoring outdoor events since 1920. They shut it down. The university shut it down because going outside is too dangerous.
I know, that was
Mike.
amazing. So I just want to get Teslin in
Yes.
Lenore, just a second. What was your?
Well, I'm a mother of a 10-year-old daughter, so this for me is a tough story. You know, I do think that people should be allowed to raise their children as they want to. For example, when we had to deal with the spanking issue, are you allowed to spank a child or not spank a child? You know, what is abuse? I grew up old school. I also was a latchkey kid. You know, my mother worked 10 professions, wasn't on welfare, wasn't on the government. She worked. So when I came home from school, I was by myself at 10 years old. I locked the door and I stayed in the house. I'm not a big fan personally of having my child in public places by herself, and not because I'm afraid of being independent, but I've had things, you know, happen to me as a child at 10 years old. I'm not just concerned about an abduction or what the statistics say, but when you look at pedophiles, when I look at inappropriate situations that have even happened with me as a child, those are things that I look at when I'm sending my little girl, you know, into the world, into the public place. So I think each parent has the right to decide what they want to do, and the government has to decide what is endangerment. Is that when we're talking about clothing or we're talking about shelter and so forth? But it is a very tough subject for me to have, because I wouldn't send my child on a subway and say, let's figure out if you can get back and use 2 quarters for a non-existent payphone. I don't even know who has a payphone.
I think you make a good point, which is that, you know, in the end, the bias should be in favor of, you know, trusting the parent to make the decision rather than the state enforcing a very risk-averse view. But Lenore, I just wanted to take it to, you know, bring it up to date really with this law that's been passed in Utah. Tell us about that and the significance of that, and what you'd like to see happen next.
So the law is called the Free Range Parenting Law, and it basically says that it's there's no cause for the government to get involved if a child is, you know, has parents are not blatantly disregarding their child's safety and welfare. But if the kid is walking to school or playing outside and the government gets a 911 call, whether it goes to Child Protective Services or the cops, they say, okay, is the child okay? And the answer is yes. They say, well, thank you very much. And they don't have to proceed. And if you ask me, that's great, because I'm happy Child Protective Services exist and that the cops are out there. But I want them investigating cases where children really are in danger, where somebody has left the child alone in a house full of drugs, or they're pimping out their child. Not when they've made a decision, you know what, I'm going to be an hour late today. You go home and I'll meet you there. Please, you know, don't set the house on fire. And statistically, the child is at least as safe walking home as driving them home. And we don't arrest parents for putting their kids in danger when we drive them, even though the #1 way kids die is as car passengers. So we really have to have laws that are based on reality. We can't just say, oh, it's so scary out there, I'm going to arrest any parent who lets their kid play outside. That's a law based on hysteria, not fact.
So, Lenore, thanks. Just a quick comment from both of you. I mean, I like the idea that we can actually turn this culture around by, you know, things like this law in Utah. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lenore is exactly right. If they're, you know, the cops should be arresting the pedophiles and putting them away forever. But the importance of teaching responsibility, if you believe in self-governance, and we all do, then you're not going to have a society that is able to govern itself unless you have responsible, independent, thinking adults or youngsters becoming adults.
Doesn't last word.
Just as a mother, I trust my 10-year-old. I think she's extremely responsible. She does what I tell her to do, but there's just some situations that I just don't want a chance. But I don't need the government telling me what that situation should or should not be.
I think that's exactly. I think we all agree about that. Lenore, thank you so much for joining us tonight, but also for all the campaigning you've done on this over the years. It's incredibly important, and I'm so happy that progress is being made. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for all the tweets.
It's a pleasure.